The gold conspiracy that ended the Romanov Dynasty in 1917. The streets of St. Petersburg were drowning in chaos, revolution, starvation, the end of the opulent 300-year reign of the Romanovs. Tsar Nicholas II and his entire family would soon be executed in a basement. A violent, tragic end to an era of unbridled luxury. History tells you this was a purely communist uprising, fueled by poor workers and peasants tired of poverty and war. That story is incomplete. It is the surface-level narrative designed to hide the most chilling secret of the 20th century. The Russian Revolution was a financial assassination. It was not hunger that killed the Romanovs. It was gold. It was a conspiracy executed by the world's elite bankers who viewed the Tsar, the holder of the world's largest gold reserve, as a roadblock to their plan for a global fiat debt system. They funded the revolution, supplied the Bolsheviks, and used the Tsar's own wealth to finance their demise. If you think the history of your own nation is free from such manipulation, you are dangerously naive. We are going to expose the exact root of the gold, the names of the powerful banking houses in Berlin and on Wall Street that backed Lenin, and the terrifying repeating pattern of how global finance uses bullion as a weapon to overthrow empires. This is not history. This is the playbook for modern global control. This is the deep, dark truth about the end of the last absolute monarchy. By the turn of the century, the Russian Empire was the world's financial anchor, while Britain and France were busy leveraging debt to finance their global reach. Tsar Nicholas II implemented the gold standard in 1897, backed by the largest physical stockpile of gold in the world. At its peak, the Russian state bank held over 1,600 tons of pure gold. This immense reserve was the envy and the frustration of the West. Russia's strength was not its army, it was its metallic solvency. It could not be easily manipulated by loans or controlled by the whims of foreign paper currencies. This vast, untouchable vault of gold made the Tsar an obstacle to the establishment of a truly global, dollar-denominated debt market. He held the key to an old system, and the emerging financial powers wanted that key, and the gold itself. The sheer volume of this wealth is often understated. We are talking about gold that represented the culmination of centuries of Russian mineral extraction and prudent, albeit autocratic, financial management. This reserve did more than back the ruble. It backed the Tsar's independence. Any nation that could finance its own wars, its own industrialization, and its own infrastructure without submitting to the major banking cartels of London, Paris, and New York was, by definition, an enemy of the established financial order. The gold standard in the Russian context was a political statement. We do not need your credit. This single financial fact set the gears of global conspiracy in motion. The Tsar's gold was a wall that had to be torn down, and the tearing down began not with a single bullet, but with a complex web of wartime financial obligations. The First World War became the immediate catalyst for the conspiracy. When the war broke out in 1914, Russia was immediately forced to suspend the gold standard to pay for the massive war machine. To secure vital supplies and arms from the Western allies, Britain and France, the Tsar had to pledge and then physically transfer vast amounts of his gold reserves as collateral for war loans. This gold was literally shipped out of Russia and stored in the vaults of the Bank of England and the Bank of France. This was the first strategic bleeding of the empire's core asset. The Tsar, thinking he was securing his military future, was unknowingly placing his national wealth under the custody of his creditors. The war was merely a convenient financial mechanism to relocate the prize. They made sure the gold was out of Russia, safe in their hands, before they unleashed the revolution. This transfer was not a simple loan. It was the collateralization of an empire. This act, more than any single battle, guaranteed the financial ruin of the Romanovs, regardless of the war's outcome. The gold was gone, the debt remained, and the stage was set for the Bolshevik coup. But the final blow was not delivered by the Allies. It was delivered by the Axis. German intelligence, desperate to remove Russia from the Eastern Front, realized the cheapest and most effective weapon was subversion, and the fuel for subversion is gold. The details are irrefutable. The German High Command, through their agent Alexander Parvus, a cynical revolutionary-turned-German agent, funneled millions of German marks and gold through neutral countries to the Bolsheviks. The total sum channeled to Lenin's Revolutionary Party has been estimated in the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars at the time, a staggering amount that far exceeded the grassroots contributions of any worker-s movement. This was not spare change. This was a deliberate, massive, state-sponsored financial attack. The Germans saw the collapse of the Romanovs as a strategic military victory. They did not care who seized power as long as Russia pulled out of the war. This was transactional violence fueled by gold. The gold secured the safe passage of Lenin and his followers from Switzerland through Germany in the sealed train. And that same gold paid for the pamphlets, the organizational costs, and the armed militias that would ultimately topple the provisional government. But the German funding was only part of the conspiracy. The deeper, darker funding came from Wall Street. Evidence suggests prominent banking figures in New York saw the Tsar's regime as an anachronism, a government too stable, too tied to gold, and too resistant to the liberal, debt-based capitalism they championed. Jacob Schiff, of the powerful Kuhn Loeb Co banking house, was one of the key figures implicated. Schiff publicly expressed his hatred for the Tsarist regime and its historical treatment of Jewish populations. But his actions were purely financial. By supporting the groups intent on dissolving the empire, Schiff and others aimed to open up the massive Russian economy, its railroads, its industries, and its vast mineral wealth to Western exploitation and financing. They needed Russia to enter the global credit system, not remain stubbornly self-sufficient on gold. The Tsar was the last obstacle to the complete global dominance of the debt-based financial model. The removal of the gold-backed Russian anchor was a prerequisite for the coming age of global central banking. The conspiracy was thus bipartisan: German gold for immediate military collapse and Wall Street capital for long-term financial domination. The Bolsheviks were simply the willing, violent executors of a plan drawn up in Berlin and Manhattan. They were the muscle hired to do the dirty work of repossessing the Russian economy. This dual financing mechanism is the core of the gold conspiracy. It was a massive financial short sell on the Russian state, where the profit was the ability to dictate the terms of Russia's future. This is the dark pattern of geopolitical finance. Fund the chaos, ensure the fall, then step in to pick up the pieces and dictate the terms of reconstruction. When the revolution finally erupted in 1917, the Bolsheviks faced an immediate problem. The Tsar's gold reserves were scattered. The most critical portion, known as the Kazan Gold Reserve, was stored far east of Moscow in the city of Kazan. This was the largest untouched bulk of Russian wealth. The race for this gold became the central financial conflict of the subsequent civil war. In August 1918, the White Army, led by Admiral Kolchak, successfully seized the Kazan treasury, roughly 650 tons of gold bullion, coins, and jewels. This single event was the largest theft of state wealth in history. The gold immediately became the ultimate war chest, financing the anti-Bolshevik forces and briefly giving them a lifeline. But the gold proved to be a curse. Kolchak's white forces were unable to secure their supply lines or maintain public support, and the gold became a heavy, immobile liability. As Kolchak's forces retreated, the gold train was captured piece by piece, stolen by warlords, and ultimately fell back into the hands of the Bolsheviks. The chaos surrounding the Romanov gold was absolute. It was transported by slow train, guarded by shifting loyalties, and targeted by every faction from the Czech Legion to local bandits. A significant portion of the Kazan gold disappeared permanently during this period of transit. It simply vanished from the official records, dissolving into the private vaults of opportunists, generals, and likely into the black markets of the Far East. This missing gold represents the pure, untraceable profit extracted from the Civil War. But here is where the conspiracy takes its final, chilling turn. The bulk of the gold that the Bolsheviks did recover was not simply hoarded, they weaponized it for survival. The gold that was supposed to fund the counter-revolution ended up funding the Soviet industrialization. In the 1920s, the newly formed Soviet Union, desperate for technology, machinery, and food to survive internal strife and famines, used the recovered Romanov gold to trade directly with the West. They sold the gold to the same financial houses in London, Paris, and New York that had, in part, sought the Tsar's demise. The circle was complete. Tsarist gold was transformed into Western fiat currency, which was then used to purchase the Western industrial capacity that allowed the Soviet regime to survive and solidify its power. The gold of the old empire cemented the foundation of the new. It was a brutal transaction that ensured the global financial system, now increasingly reliant on paper money and debt, swallowed the last great gold-backed empire whole. The Romanov gold did not disappear. It was strategically recycled to fuel the New World economic order. The very asset that gave the Tsar his independence became the tool of his successor's survival, all thanks to the banking infrastructure that facilitated the initial betrayal. The lesson for us today is terrifyingly clear and immediate. Gold is the ultimate financial weapon. If a national leader is too tied to physical assets, like gold, they become a target for those who profit from debt and paper money. If a government holds too much gold, its creditors see it as an attractive target for subversion. The Romanovs held too much, making them impervious to debt, and so they were simply removed. This pattern repeats today, albeit on a micro scale. Every effort by the financial establishment to delegitimize gold, to promote fiat currency, or to push the narrative of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, is an attempt to remove your final financial anchor and make you wholly dependent on the system of centralized debt. The global debt market now stands at unprecedented levels. The US dollar, the new global king of the paper system, is leveraged against faith alone. When faith is lost and the next great financial implosion arrives, nations and individuals will scramble for the one asset that cannot be printed. The gold conspiracy that ended the Romanovs is a warning. Physical wealth is the ultimate power, and those who control the flow of money will always conspire to control the assets that stand outside their system. Do not be the oblivious czar of your own financial future. You must understand the dark history of money to protect your own wealth. Subscribe and turn on notifications now to join the community that tracks the true power dynamics of the world. We are dedicated to exposing the financial traps they set for you. We have covered the debt that sank Napoleon and the gold that killed the Romanovs. Next, we expose the horrifying secret behind the Weimar Republic's economic collapse. Click on the next video now as we reveal the inflation trap that crushed Germany and how the US repeats it. Don't let their financial tricks blind you. Demand the truth.